All right, welcome back. We are COMP229 Web Application Development in the summer 2022 semester at Centennial, and it's week 11. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today as normal. So again, from an evaluation perspective, the authentication release is due the end of this week on Sunday. Hopefully you guys are good, and many of you, I've seen a couple of teams this last week when I was kind of looking at your work, giving you guys feedback, that you already have authentication components built in, which is really great. That's good that you guys are advanced that way. And again, because you knew it was coming, you guys built it in, and that's great. And then, of course, the final release is something on the horizon that we have to look at, which is going to be due at the end of this semester. So, and then that combined with the final presentation, which I'm hoping to see you guys do live for me, at least in some way or another, on the last week of class. We'll see how that goes. All right, so that's what's happening. We're sitting at week 11 on the course shell. Right now, we have Firebase Essential Training, which is pretty awesome. So we'll talk about that really briefly. In terms of components, stuff that's due, again, authentication release, weekly report 3 and 4 is next week. Peer reviews this week. So I think it's pretty good. And we're going to be talking more about React today. Hopefully that last week kind of was a nice little primer for you to get you guys going with React, so you guys understand the, kind of the components, the process a little bit, and get you guys into it. Again, if you started with your EJS view engine, that's okay, right? And if you wanted to ever go to React, it's not a terrible transition, as you'll see after today, right? So you can do it. The only thing means that you have to kind of rework some of the things that you're doing with EJS. But at the end of the day, I think it's good learnings for you and great to put on your resume. All right, so that is kind of where we're starting today. But before we do anything, what I'd like to do is take a look at your teamwork and see what you've been doing. Does anyone want to share any updates at all about their project? And want to get any feedback about where you are right now? I know people continue to evolve their application. So if you're interested in getting feedback, you can certainly let me know, and then we'll put you up on the screen and then see how you're doing. So I'll start with that first. So is anyone ready to do that today? How about that? If you're not, it's totally okay. I can move on to the actual tech part of things, and we can talk about those things. And if you are, great. Any volunteers? How about my friend Elias?
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to put you on the spot.
No problem. No
Listen,
problem.
listen. If you're not ready, it's okay. I don't expect
Yeah,
anyone. Yeah,
look in the hierarchical link.
And even Bhupinder, he was giving me all kinds of awesome conversation this morning. So either one of you guys
Yeah,
doesn't matter, right? But if you guys aren't ready, listen, it's no problem.
yeah, I know.
Yeah, hold on a second. What I'll do is I will stop sharing my screen, and I will start allowing you to. Thank you, Elias. You're pretty awesome. Thank you for that. I just I kind of bamboozled you a little bit there. So go ahead. You're
Yeah,
right. Whenever you're ready. Yeah, go ahead.
okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Absolutely, yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, we added a little bit of CSS. It's not like completed that far yet, but
Yeah.
we have some stuff there. So we are not logged in, and if we go to service list, we can see all the services there that
Right.
are active. And the owner, Paul, administrator, and this is some users we created.
Good.
We can answer them.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good. That's good.
As you remember,
Yeah.
as you read,
Yeah.
this is the true false.
That's great. That's great. Looks much better. Yeah.
And if I click add survey, it will take me to the login page because to create survey,
Yeah.
need to be logged in. So we can register, but let me show you just a user. So if I log in, I can see only my own service. There are two that I created. I can edit I can delete,
Nice.
and I can answer them. So if I log out, I just have one now. Let me log out. Like now there's one. You remember word two from Elias. Now it's one. And if let me log in with Paul user.
It's okay.
Yeah, it's like that. So I just can see Paul's in your pastors places. And yeah, so far it's working good. Oh, we fixed what you told us. For example, let me add a survey here. If I select, let's create one, I select from 12 and this one from 5th. And if I try to submit, it will say, no, please enter a validated date intervals because the start date can be before, like after the end date, right?
Yeah.
And if I select 12 and I select the date that has passed, it doesn't matter. I put active here. Something real quick. Look, even if I put active, it is inactive because the day just passed to the first.
Okay.
If I put it active, it will stay inactive because the date is not actual.
That's good.
So, but let me change. Let me put a future date. Let me put 28 active. Now it's active.
Good. Excellent.
So yeah, we fix your feedback. We take your feedback and fix whatever we could. Now the next step for us is we are going to take some of the team members and give them like a temporary role of QA testers so they can test the whole application. And yeah, that's it for now.
That's very good. So the only thing that I have to ask at this stage is, because it looks like you got a lot for what you need for authentication, most of it actually. The only thing that I would ask is, what about if the person wanted to make the survey that was from today to today? How does that work? Like, is it like open at kind of midnight and close at midnight? How does that work? Because there's no
I have no problems with the UTC format and changing to EST, but yeah, I think it works. I don't know if I can show you the code, but yeah, I tried to do it. But I need to validate that it's exactly the last hour of the day. But yeah, it should work like that.
So what I recommend is
should
like
be available today.
Yeah. So what there you go. Okay, good. So what I recommend is, though, that I mean, I know this is kind of an extra little bit, but and I know it works, and that's fine. But I recommend for perhaps a change, if you're looking for something, is maybe you want to also have the user select their time as well, right? Because
user select their time.
Yeah, because I'm just suggesting it only because what if they want to end at 5 p.m. on you
mean the time too?
Well, I don't think I'm not going to tell you it's required. I never said that it was required, but I think it's very helpful. I'm just going to say let's look at it as a nice to have. Okay, I'm not going to tell you it's absolutely required. As long as you can, kind of run a survey in day, that's fine, which is what you've done. Okay, but what I think is, and this is great that you're showing me this too.
I put everything here.
Yeah, but again,
the way to remember.
Yeah, this is great that we can see this too. But and the reason why I'm mentioning it is because this way, if you have time, if you can do it, I think it'd add a lot of value to your activation. That kind of stuff. So it's good. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for that. I'll take over again if you don't mind, and then we'll go to yes. Yeah, you know, but we
Oh,
don't.
this is it. This is it. This is it. Let today, new date. I tried to use this, but I don't know. Set hours 24, 59, 59. This is supposed to give me like the last time. I don't know if there's a better way to do it because
No, it's
I
okay.
can.
But you know what I recommend, Elias? That, and this is
Yeah.
what I would do. All right. If you're going to do this kind of work here in your process edit survey page method, I recommend instead making a date formatter in your utility, in the utility kind of folder, right? So in your index, your utility index.ts file, as an example, my recommendation is somewhere in here, make another method or a couple of methods that allows you to format the date here. So that way you don't have to do it there. And you make your own custom formatter, right? Because I recommend that instead. And this way you can, it's easier to test, right? Because what you're going to do is you have one method to test dates with, right? And you can test it from anywhere as opposed to only in one place. Like what if you need a date somewhere else again, right? You don't want to replicate your work. So that's why I recommend making your own custom formatter here. Something like that's why I made this thing in the first place, right?
Yeah, totally right.
Okay, I'll let you do. We'll talk more about that later. Let's move on to anyone else. Thank you for that, though. That's awesome. So Elias and his team were just showing me their work, and I'm just going to share my screen again. Is anyone else interested in showing me their work really quickly before we move on to the topic of today?
Professor, I can go quickly.
Okay, Famid, go ahead. Do you want to share or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I want to share.
Okay, so hold on a second here. Then we'll just go back to this and you can share whenever you're ready to go. Oops, the wrong one. There we go. Right.
So, we didn't add authentication yet. My team members are working on it.
Yep. Yep.
We'll show you the current round of the tournament.
Good, good.
So this is the things I've done this week, and
Great. Thank you for that.
uh,
I got a question for you though. What about the graphic stuff? What do you what's your progress on that? Is are you going to start working on I know it's not due yet, but what's your plan for actually making it more representable here instead of just you know, the way you have it?
sir, like, do you want me to have like page by page or in, like in a single page, like channel?
It's really up to you. I recommend that this way. What you've done right here is good for testing and for starting, but I think about it from the user perspective, right? What would you think the user would prefer, right? Do you think that they want to manage everything in one place? I mean, it really depends on how you want to manage your tournaments, right? So if you want to just show one round at a time, that's perfectly fine. And but think about making it more, like I said, more graphical.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when it comes to looking at the whole thing from a high level, there might be a good opportunity for you to do that. So lots and lots of stuff out there that you can use to make it like that. And some people even added things like animations and those things at the end. But it's totally up to you. I'm not going to force you. It's up to you how you want to do it and what kind of user experience you want to provide for the end user. Right. So start thinking about it now. If you haven't thought about it already, and if it's not in your plan, I would put it in at this point. Right. That's what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Yeah.
This is Josh. I'm in this group too. We do have a plan for this. It's just not implemented yet.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Hamid. Okay, and we heard from a couple of people. I'm going to move on at this point. if you don't mind, just so that we can continue the flow of tech and everything else from today. One thing that I wanted to do for for our other team here that we just saw, our friends that are doing the tournament site, which is kind of the only one, I think, or one of the only ones. There are some great tools out there for animation and graphics that you can use. So take a look at Create.js, which is kind of interesting. So Create.js is it's kind of a little bit of an older library, but it's really quite good. I've used it extensively to make games with completely, okay, from the ground up. But the great thing about this is that it has something called easel.js, right? And easel.js, if you take a look at the documentation for this stuff, you can make use of the HTML canvas object. And the canvas, what you can do is you can put the canvas anywhere on the screen that you want. Think about it as a container that if you want to do any kind of animations or drawing or anything like that, you can use that from the get-go, which is pretty cool, right? So sorry, Kaying, yeah, that's fine, Kaying. So that's something that that you can use as well. And what this allows you to do is there's just drawing utilities that are part of this thing, and it's amazing what you can do with easel.js. So good thing is it supports TypeScript. You can make easel.js work from anywhere, even from Node or from the front end, as an example. And people have used it for things like banner ads and a bunch of other stuff, which is pretty cool. And it might work good for your tournaments, because what you can do is it rasterizes the data, and you can use it as to do pretty much anything you want. So again, I'm not going to mandate it, of course, for you, but I just take a look. If it suits you, that's great. If it doesn't, that's okay too. But take a look at easel.js. Easel.js is from a suite of libraries called Create.js, and it includes Create.js, Tween.js, which helps you do things like animations, Sound.js, which allows you to do sounds, Preload.js, which preloads all your graphics and those kind of things as well, right, as an example. So you can preload some of this stuff, right? And it's pretty great, the way it works. And it's kind of a suite of libraries that you can use if you're interested. So that's just kind of a preview of what you can possibly do. All right, so that is just for those people who are doing the tournament stuff. I was just thinking about it, and that's probably what I would do. But there's other libraries out there that do very similar things. Okay. Okay, so yes, we talked about these. On the course shell is a very, very important piece, Firebase. So what if you didn't want to use MongoDB Atlas, and you're thinking about making your app into a mobile application? There are some great tools out there, and probably one of the best tools that I always recommend is something called Firebase. And Firebase is built by Google, actually, and it's free to use for us at the beginning anyway for what we need to do. And it's amazing what you can kind of put together with Firebase. If you have a Google account, or if not, you can kind of put one together. And at the back end, what ends up happening is you have a very straightforward serverless database that you can use that's very similar to MongoDB in many ways, but also quite different. If I was going to go to the console, and if I was going to take a look at making a new project, let's make a new one. This is just Firebase really quickly. Let's suppose I want to make a new project called, COMP229 Summer 2022, right here. So here's the project. And I want to continue with this one. Let me show you what this looks like. And it does Google Analytics. We'll just turn Google Analytics off for us right now because, we're not going to use it. But look, it has a lot of really cool things that it comes with. I'm just turning it off because, just not using it right now. But, if you're someone who, again, who's a YouTube person and you're connected with Google Analytics and a bunch of other stuff, or even using Google Cloud Platform, Firebase is definitely a natural fit for you as well. And it's great with iOS and Android devices. So if you're someone who's thinking about making your app mobile, take a look. There are APIs for iOS and Android, and of course the web, as well as, and this is really cool, Unity engine if you're someone who's going to program games, or Flutter, which is something that's new. This is new. All right, so if you look at from a web perspective how this works, let's suppose I'm making my web app and I called it my React app. Let's suppose, right? And it says also set up Firebase hosting for this app. You can actually host everything online with the function. So even if you wanted to host your Node.js part up here, you could instead of Heroku. It's cool. I'm not going to do that right now, just to keep it simple. I'm just going to click register app. Right, so, and it tells you basically exactly how to install it, just like this. So if I wanted to do an npm install or a yarn install Firebase, it installs it, it gives you your API key, and so on. And with Firebase, I'm just going to continue to the console. With Firebase, what you can do is do things like, if I want to build authentication, if I want to, kind of do anything like that, it's kind of available for us to start off with for free. And the great thing about this is, let's say I want to build something like a real-time database, which is something that you'd be doing. Then in here, if I'm building a database, let's just create our database and we'll call it, just to show you this thing really quickly, we'll start in test mode. And if I create a database here for my React app, you can see that you get a endpoint, API endpoint for this. This is what it looks like, right? As an example, which is pretty cool. This is our data. And, you can, with the data itself that you can put together, it's pretty slick in terms of how, things are constructed. You can create rules for how to read and write, the whole thing in terms of background and everything else. Let's go back to real-time Firebase. All right, so that's one thing you can do. You can also do, like I said, authentication, where you can build in authentication for a separate authentication service, which is pretty cool. So it keeps it all separate, which is nice, and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so I would say take a look at Firebase. Firebase, the beautiful thing about it, has tons of documentation on how to use it. And again, is becoming very, very popular, or actually it's been very, very popular for mobile applications. So it's not something to discount, and it's an alternate backend for your MongoDB Atlas database, which is, sometimes that what people prefer. So I'm putting it out there. I think it's also good learnings, but it will modify a lot of your code. So unless you're really pushing for, to learn different technologies this semester, you don't have to do it. But at the end of the day, what I think is really great is, I'm showing it to you as an alternative to a backend. Sorry, Elias has a question. How can I run a process every time my app starts to inactivate surveys that end state is before actual date? You can't really do that unless you run your own bot. That's a whole other thing. So what I recommend is it's almost like when somebody looks at the front page, Elias, they cause the survey to be active or inactive. It's kind of a hack at this point that I would recommend. Because if you do it with a timer or something, let's suppose I could put together a timer. There's timers out there that you can put together on Node, because Node can have a timer running. If you look it up, there are some. So let's say, for example, if I wanted to make some kind of timer on Node.js, right? I don't think it's necessarily wrong to do, right? As an example, I just seen that. It contains functions that execute code after a set period of time, and timers do not need to be imported because they're part of Node, right? So it's built in. And so you could definitely do this. And so let's say every day you want to check at the end of the day, Node can do this for you built in. And there's nothing wrong with it, but sometimes it acts really funny. So I would, if you're going to enact a timer like this, and I think it's, not a negative thing to do, also, when the user goes and takes a look at your list, what I would recommend is do another check when everyone's looking at your survey list. And this way, you have a kind of a prime and a backup. Maybe your prime is the timer, and your backup is when people go in and take a look at your site. That's another check, another time, another opportunity for you to check to see if the surveys should remain active or not. Does that make sense? So that's the way to do it. Okay, so okay, so let's get back to what we're talking about today. So that's what's online is this. It's the real-time database that you can put together, and authentication and a bunch of other stuff that they have here. Functions is really cool. So it's a serverless opportunity for you to host your Node.js app here. You can actually do it through Firebase instead of through Heroku, and it's kind of a slick interface as well. It also supports machine learning and a bunch of other stuff. Again, definitely an opportunity if you're interested in learning new tools. Okay, that's what I was talking about. So that's this piece. And that's on the course shell. I also recommend on the course shell, there is some LinkedIn learning resources that you can also go to as well. So if you were interested in learning about Firebase, you can always go to LinkedIn Learning. And under LinkedIn Learning, excuse me, if I go to LinkedIn Learning, and let's just go to my personal account for a second. And if I go here and put in Firebase, wow. You can see that Firebase Essential Training has been updated August 2020, which is not so bad. And if you go there, it has a bunch of videos all on how to use Firebase and everything else. And for the most part, it's exactly the same as it is now. And it talks about many different opportunities to use it. So Firebase, again, really cool tool, something that is, is being used as the back end for many web applications and mobile applications. Okay, so that is Firebase. Next, let's talk about React. So far, what we did last week, this is today's live session now. So for React, last week, what we did was we had this application here. Here's our application. And remember what we did was we downloaded and installed our React front end, and we created some folders and everything else. But right now, as you can see, all the folders are pretty much mostly empty. So I have my content. My models are kind of empty. My movie list is empty. My services are empty. And I want to put more stuff in here to make things work properly. And one of the things, in order for us to connect to the backend, is almost like we need to do some kind of API call, similar to using Ajax for the first time. We want to be able to do an HTTP request. So how do we do this with React? Well, React doesn't have anything built in necessarily to do that, but there is a great tool that I like to use when it comes to React, and it's called Axios. Okay, so Axios is a tool we need to use and download for to make sure that we can work things together with React. Take a look at what it looks like. I want to make a GET request as an example from an API as an example, and then I want to get some data back. This is exactly what we want from our app. One thing is it's platform agnostic, so you can use it on Angular, you can use it on React, you can use it even without any of those tools. If you just want to have a front end, it's totally fine to do that as well. So Axios is something that we've moved towards, as opposed to using something like a built-in service that for React. So how do we install it? If we click Get Started, it'll talk about how to install it. We're going to use yarn add Axios, and let's do this now. So again, going back to here, just to prep, before we start, I'm going to do this in your back end. I'm going to say, or in the front end, I'll say yarn add Axios and at types Axios. And if I do that, let's see what we get when we do that kind of stuff. And there we go. So you can see that if I go to our package.json, you can see now, we've added in Axios. And it'll give us an opportunity for us to use those tools to connect again to the to the backend. That's what we're going to use Axios for. Let's take a look at some of the more documentation. So that's how you install it. And you can also use, again, if you're not using Node and you just want to attach it to a web application, that's why I'm saying it's really great. It doesn't need a backend like Node or even React or Angular. You can use it for any web application to replace Ajax in pretty much most ways, which is great. So, and this is all the documentation you'll need on how to do it. If I wanted to do from an example perspective, let's say, for example, here's the minimal example. It really talks about how to do a GET request. What it does is it uses something called a promise. And promises are something that are built into ECMAScript 2015, 2016, 2017, all the latest versions of JavaScript. So you can say something like, I want to do a GET request, then I want to do something else. If there's a problem, I want to catch the problem, do something, handle the problem, and then I want to do something else after that. And you can see that this then is always executed. So this is definitely a way of doing it without doing a try-catch, because the try-catch is built into the request, which is pretty cool. And that is the way you would do it. So kind of cool in terms of making a request. And you can make it asynchronous or whatever. You can also do post requests. So post requests is something that we're going to have to do as well when it comes to logging in and processing our changes to the application and so on. So this is, again, a great little tool to help us do that from a front end perspective. Okay, so to prepare for this, going back to our code here, what we need is some common components. And again, there's a couple ways to do this. So one way to do it would be if I have here authentication components, content, models, movie lists, and services. And under components, we have a footer and a header. And these are common components that are available for every page. So what I'd like to do is a lot of times put our Axios components in here. And it's almost like I want to call this HTTP common. So again, I'm going to make a new file. Here's our new component. Before we get there, let's run the server. So we'll do a yarn start. And I think the reason why I always like to do the server is so we can check to see if things are good when we're adding in components on the React side. Okay. And the reason why is if we don't think, if we're not sure that things are good and we attach things or run stuff, and then later on we'll figure out that there's a problem, which is not a good, kind of workflow. We want to make sure that things are good from the get-go. And so here's our application. Let's make sure the thing's running. Now it takes a second, if you notice, it takes a second for this to kick off. And I'm not sure if you guys have been following along with the React process or not, because again, it's an optional front end, but I think it's really great for you guys to kind of learn about this whole thing and how long it takes. Okay, there it is. So there's our React front end that we have so far, and it doesn't do much. Okay, it does this. I've given you guys a contact list page and so on, which is pretty cool. But that's really all it does right now. And what we need to do is connect it to the back end. You can see here that it's connected and everything else is working fine. Okay, cool. So now going back to our components, I want to add a new file. And the new file that I want to add, right? Let's do that again. I want to call this the HTTP common component. So HTTP common, okay? And it's kind of like a component, but it's more like it's not truly a component. It's almost like a service or the ability for me to connect. It gives me almost like the ability for me to connect with our backend. So I'm going to call it, it's a TSX file. And here I'm going to import, here's the first time I'm going to import Axios. So I'm going to import Axios as an example from Axios. So that's what you have to do there. And I'm going to immediately export default. So instead of making a standard component, I'm going to export default the creation of my Axios object. So I'm going to create an Axios object. And when I create the Axios object, I want to have a couple of things. One is I want this base URL to something that I want to always have. And of course, for now, my base URL is going to be something like http://localhost, right, and 3500, right? That is going to be my backend API. That's my base URL. And then I'm going to add to that base URL, almost like a starting point for all my API calls, okay? The next thing is, what if this was on Heroku, as an example? Well, if it was on Heroku, the base URL might look something like, I don't know, https:// maybe something like COMP229 in the summer 2022, section 2 .herokuapp.com /API. If I was going to host it online, it might look like this, okay, as an example. Okay. And then you put in your headers. That's an important piece to put in and to configure as well. And your headers information should be the type of application you are connecting to, which is you put in something like content type and then application/JSON. And the reason why we want all this configuration here in this common area for Axios is we can reuse kind of this stuff over and over again. Notice that there's no issues with our site. It didn't take our site down when we did that. As long as I have an export here, right, then we're good to go. Okay, that's what it does. So that is the common component. Let's put this up on GitHub because that is our HTTP common component. Okay, so git add dot, git commit -m, and I'll say added Axios HTTP common component, which is kind of gives us some configuration really for Axios. Okay. So again, Axios is going to help us with connecting. It's a good little feature, and that is our first piece. And now that we have that, we have our HTTP common component, we want to start thinking about services. And in our services, we want to think about things like, if I want to authenticate, how do I do that, right? How do I authenticate myself? Because without authentication, we're not going to get any data, remember? Because our data is locked down, right? So I'm going to make my own auth service. And a service is different than a component in that, yes, we still do an export default, but it's something like common functions that we're going to use to log in, log out, and all those kinds of things. That's what we're going to do with our authentication service. And today, because it's all about authentication, first we create the service, and then we create our authentication components. All right, so let's do the service first. So the service, let's make it, so brand new file, and the service is going to be the auth service, right, the authentication service, and it's going to be called auth service.tsx. So it will be called, again, using the same, kind of thing. So we'll say auth service.tsx. There it is, auth service.tsx. Again, because we're making a TSX file, we need to do some exporting and importing. Here, I'm going to say, I want access to my HTTP calls that I'm going to use with Axios. So I'm going to say import HTTP from, and then it's going to be .. components / and then it's going to be HTTP common. So this is where I'm going to get it from. This is going to represent my HTTP calls. I'm going to make a new class this time around, not a function, but actually a class that's going to be called Auth Service. Okay, so this is the first time we're using a class, but think about it as a class like we normally do. Here's our Auth Service class. And in the Auth Service class alone, remember, a class is, it's kind of a little different than what we've done so far with React. So we're going to have a public login component, right? And what it's going to take is a username like normal, right, which is going to be a string, and a password, which also is going to be a string. So that is the function on the front end. And this is where we're going to actually do our HTTP calls, right? So it's going to do it for us. So we're going to say return, and again, http.post. This is how it's going to be. And it's going to be, we're going to take it to the login page. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. So remember how this works, right? Even though it says login, because our common component over here, HTTP comment, starts off like this, it's going to actually look like this: http:/localhost 3500/API/login, right? And this is exactly what we want from our auth service. So it's going to perform our login, and that's what this thing is all about. Okay, so this is login, and we're going to pass in the information we're going to pass is the data. Look here, this is the information from Axios. It says we need a URL, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the data object, and the data object is going to be username and password, whatever the username and password is for the post request that we're going to make. Okay, and then so remember, we're going to use the promise syntax. Then our response, we're going to use a fat arrow function for this. Fat arrow function is one of the ways we can do functions. And if my response data.token, because remember we're getting a token, if I have a data token from my response, then what I want to do is I want to save that data token so we can use it again and send it back to the backend. Let me explain this again. Remember what happens on the backend. The backend feeds us a token, a JSON token. Remember, JWT. We need to store this token somewhere while we're logged in. If we don't store this token, the front end is going to forget about it. There's no state for the front end. So what we're going to do is we're going to use local storage. So I'll say, hey, local storage. Local storage, by the way, is in your browser. And I want to set item. Local storage works with key value pairs. So the key is going to be user, and the value for this thing is going to be JSON stringify the response data. Okay, we're going to look at that in a second. And then what I want to do is I want to return response.data. All right, so that's what I want to do. Now, if you notice, as soon as I have a return type here, right, then my login, as an example, when I start thinking about how this works, notice it says my login returns a promise of type any. That's what it does. So that is my login. Now, auth service, it says, is declared but never used. We also need to kind of return auth service as an object. So I'm going to export default so it doesn't break my code. And it's going to be a new auth service. I'm actually, what I'm doing here is I'm instantiating an object. As soon as this is called for the first time, I'm instantiating an object of type auth service. Okay, so anytime I call my auth service, I instantiate a new object, and then I store stuff. When I'm logging in, I store stuff here. So that is my login method. My login, again, what it does is it uses Axios to make an HTTP call, right? Almost like an AJAX call, exactly. And then I'm waiting for the response, and I want to get the response.data.token. Okay, whoa, where is this coming from, this data.token? Okay, well, it really depends on how I set it up on the back end, right? So remember, I'm going to /login. Okay, I'm going to /login. So when you think about this, if I'm going to go to /login, and if I look at let's take a look at the backend for 1 second. Here's our backend API. And if I go to the server on the backend API, we have a route, and the route is your auth route. Here's your auth route. Let's take a look. I'm just going to edit it really quickly. So what happens is we go to the auth route, and here's your post login, which goes to the process login page on the rec controller, right? Okay, so let's trace it. So from here, I'm going to go to the controllers, and I'm going to go to the auth controller, and I'm going to edit it. And then as we see, we're going to go to the process login page. Okay, process login page. What does it return? Take a look. So it says, okay, I'm using local authentication, and then I'm going to generate a token at some point, right? And I'm going to return the following. I'm going to return my message and a user object. Here's my user object with all this information plus this, a token. Here's my token. Well, guess what? That's what this is. So token, response.data, is something that is from Axios. Token is from me. I return a token. This is part right here. So I can return anything. I can get the response.data.user. I can get the response.data.message or whatever, right? Or success. But that's what this is. This token comes from the backend, and this is where I'm getting it. And then I'm taking this token and I'm storing it using local storage. Okay, let's take a look at local storage for those people who forgot or never got trained on local storage. So if I go to JavaScript local storage and see what that is, just as an example, what it allows us to do is it allows us to store our data in key value pairs, where the key is like a dictionary. The key is some kind of key, and the value is whatever value we're going to store in local storage. Okay, that's what it does. We can set item, get item, remove item, and clear. Those are the basic functions. And where it's stored, just to show you where this is stored, if I go back to our application here, so this one, here's our application, which is dead right now because we're not ready to store everything yet, right? So that's what this is. So again, notice that our application is crashed right now because we haven't saved it. Let's save it for a second. Here's saved. If we go back, it's working. And if I go to look at local storage here, notice that if I go to my application, there is something called local storage. Here's local storage right here. Notice that in local storage, this is inside of your browser, you have key value pairs. This is where it's going to be stored. And it's going to be, for the most part, something that you can see. Okay, so why would I put it here? Because what you're doing is when you log in, you're going to get a key, right? A token. And you want to be able to keep it in local storage somewhere on your browser until it expires, and then use that key to log in. That's what you're going to be doing. Okay. All right, so that is the first piece. The first piece is, hey, can we make a login, kind of service? Log in and log out. Let's do the log out part. So that's login. So public, we're also going to do a log out. And log out is basically going to go to local storage and remove item user. So all we're doing is removing the user from local storage. So the front end is taking responsibility to keep everything secure, right? So as soon as I'm logging out, when I perform logout on the front end, I remove my local storage item so that it's not sitting there for someone to hack or use. Okay, that's what it does. So that's your auth service, log in, log out. Finally, we also want to be able to register and so on. So one thing we want to do is I want to register. When I register my user, again, I want to have my username, which is a string, my password, which is a string. I'm also going to have probably a first name, which is a string, and a last name, which is a string. Okay, first name, last name, and email address, right? When I log in, when I register. So those are all the requirements that I have from the front end. I'm getting that from a form on the front end, right, at some point. Then what I want to do is I will return an http.post request where I use the register URL, that's the URL, and the data that I'm going to send in is all that stuff. So notice the data gets sent in as an object where I'm passing in all those pieces, the username, the password, the first name, and the last name, as well as the email address. So why am I doing this on the front end like this, right? Well, I'm passing information from the front end to the back end. And this is what this does. So again, similar to what I did with my login request to my logout, I need a data token to store, but registering doesn't do that. Registering just registers a new user, right? And finally, sometimes, which is very useful for me, is I want to be able to have a public method that is called get current user, and my get current user method, and I'm going to convert these in a second. So logout, notice if I go logout, its return is void, right? Register, it returns a promise. Okay, that's what it does. But get current user, right, as an example, is going to return my user. Okay, so I'm going to make a brand new const, which is called user string. So our user string, and that is going to be, hey, local storage, let's get item, and I want to get the user item that I just stored. So if I want to get the item, if I want to retrieve the user token, I save the user token, I remove the user token, I want to be able to get the user token to make sure that we're using it somewhere else, right? If my user string exists, if it exists, then I want to return a JSONified version of my user string. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing. And this JSONified version of the user string is something that I can use as an object to log in. Otherwise, I'm going to return false. And so now this returns a special kind of return type. Take a look. The return type, it says, is of type any. So get user any, because it's either returning this, right? Which is, if I do this, it's a, when I parse a user string, because we're saying this is a string or null, right? I can always cast it, like we've done before, as a string. We can do this, right? So we can say cast as a string. So I'm returning it as a string. Here I'm parsing it as a string because this is a string, right? But again, when I parse, I'm going to return any, right? That's the type I'm going to return, right? So that's what get user does. It says it's trying to pick up what I'm trying to return, but really, when I JSON parse, it's going to be returning an object. That's what it's going to be doing. That's why it's trying to figure out what I want to return, which for now is an any type. Okay, let's leave this for now, but this is something we need to work on to improve the return type, because typically what we don't want to do is do this. This is not really great. Okay, for now it's a start though. So that is our auth service. And all the auth service does, just to show you what services do, and here's another question. What if I wanted to make this, instead of a class, if I wanted to make it a function, right? Well, again, I could certainly do that as well. If I wanted to make it function-based instead of class-based, it's no problem. The only difference is when I return it down here. Okay? And it's different than a function. And when I do a function return, right? Notice that, again, I don't have any React. It's not a React component, okay? I could always convert this, but first let's start it as a class, and let's come back to this. And I'll talk about if I wanted to use function-based as opposed to class-based, ways of doing things. But for the most part, services to me are always classes. Okay, that's just how I look at them. And that's our first service. Let's put this up on GitHub. So I'll say added auth service. So what is a service compared to a component? It does something for us. That's why it's called a service, right? It serves us some kind of information or provides some kind of functionality that's outside of components that we're creating. Okay, that's what it does. And it's something that is central that we're going to use in different places, almost like a singleton in some ways, right? So we're going to use this service maybe multiple times from different places. Okay, that's why we need this auth service. And the other thing we need when we connect to our site, as an example, is I want to think about the auth header. So the auth header, what it does is, and I'm just talking about it before I do it, is it's going to fix our bearer token. Remember we did last time is we used Postman. Remember Postman? Here's Postman. And whenever we did any kind of request, let's get into that for a second with Postman. So let's suppose we're going to use a different workspace. Let's use our workspace. That's a workspace from last day. So section 2, that's you guys. And remember we did all these kind of post requests. So we did a post request where we did a login. Here's our login, right? And in the body of our login, we kind of did an admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we got back a bearer token in the authentication. So authorization wise, when we come back, we get a bearer token that's returned. So let me show you how this works. If I click send, if it says there's a problem, then it's okay. Let's go back to here. It says error connection refused, right? From port 3500, it says. And 3500 is the back end, and of course it's going to be refused because we're not running our server on the back end. So we got to run that too, because right now we're not running a service. So that's something to remind us. Let's run a second version of Visual Studio Code. Here's our second version coming up. There it is. And in here, what I want to do is I want to run that backend service that I showed you. So again, just like grabbing the backend and putting it here. There we go. Here's our backend service. And what I want to do is I want to run it. So just like we've done in the past, there's two parts to it. One part is running mongod. Let's do that first. So in one terminal, I'm going to run mongod. Because remember, we're just running completely back-end, and I can do that here. And on the other terminal here on the service, I'm going to run Nodemon. And there's Nodemon. And Nodemon is running, and it's going to detect mongod in this terminal window. And you can see that this whole thing here is my back-end server, which I can minimize. All right. Now, if I go back to here in my in Postman and I do a send, you can see now I'm going to get a response, and I'm going to get this token. And this token is something I'm going to store in local storage, right? And remember, what the token is going to look like is this plus user is going to be the name, right? But I'm getting back a bunch of other information, right? So this is what I'm getting back, right? So what I want to do is I want to use that bearer token, that's what it's called, when I do things like look at the movie list. So in my movie list, under authentication, I'm going to use the bearer token, this bearer token right here, and I want to make sure it's the most current one, so the one I just got. So I want to grab all this, right, this part, and copy it, and go back to my movie list, if I was going to log into my movie list, and replace all of this part right here with the new bearer token. Notice it's going to change now to this. This is our new bearer token. And if I click send, we're going to get all the movie list back. Well, it looks like this. So why am I showing you this? Because we need this part. We need to be able to do a bearer token header in our authentication. So our authorization requires our headers to be changed so that we use the bearer token to log in, right? Otherwise, the backend won't know that we're actually using it. That's where it's going to be stored, on a header, okay? That's not something that you can see. It's something that's part of our HTTP request. So typically what we do is with this, I'm going to have a brand new service. So new file. And that new file is going to be called the Auth Header.tsx. And Auth Header is going to be it's literally just going to be an export default. So again, a very simple export default function that is going to be called Auth Header. I'm keeping it separate, but you can certainly put it with your Auth Service. And this is going to be basically my user string is here. And I'm going to say from local storage, I want to get item user. So there's where I'm getting the user item, right? And I want my user to start off as null. Hear me out for a second. And if my user string exists, then my user is going to be a JSONified parsed version of my user string, similar to what we did already. Yeah, hold me back for a second before I move on, and I'll talk about some duplication of code we can fix in a second. And I'm going to say if my user exists and I also have a user.token, if I have my user.token, if it exists and I have both things, then what I want to do is I want to return a brand new headers object that includes, and this is the good part, authorization, right? And authorization, let's do it right, there we go. And it's going to be bearer, right? My bearer plus my user.token. And so when you look at this in the first place, you're like, wait, what? What is this? Well, what this is doing is it's creating a new headers object that I'm going to use to log in. That's what this little function is doing, this auth header that I'm creating. And what I'm doing is I'm accessing local storage here, okay, to get user. Now, again, there's lots of ways to do this same thing or to reuse some of the stuff I have in my auth service or combine it with my auth service. For now, though, my auth header is going to be on its own, and then you'll see why in a bit. Otherwise, I'm going to return an empty object. Okay, that's what I'm going to be doing. So if I return an empty object, then you notice that my auth header, if it's either going to return the headers object or some kind of empty object. That's what it's going to return. That's what my auth header is returning right now. Okay. So without the headers object, this headers object, I can't send a request, a proper request to my my backend in order for me to log in. So there's two parts to the login in process, right? There's two parts to getting information from my backend. The first part is the auth service itself, which gives me a token, and that I'm storing in local storage. That's where I'm storing it. And the second part is using that local storage, to log in with in the first place. Okay, so this is what this part does. Or to authorize myself for each transaction. So this auth header is something that I'm going to use for each transaction when I'm logged in. Okay, that's what it does. Okay, again, a bit complicated, but I'm talking about it so that you understand how this works. Okay, so that is my auth header component. Let's put this up on GitHub. So added auth header component or service component. We'll call it service. Okay. Good. That's done. All right. So we have our auth header and so on. What other services do we need? Well, we need eventually some kind of the ability for us to get our movie list data service. Our movie list data service. That's what we need too. Okay? But we're not going to do that yet. First, we're going to concentrate on authentication, right, and authorization. So next, inside of our authentication folder, what we want to do is we want to start putting in our components for logging in, logging out, registering, and all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's start off with our login component. Okay, so again, login component separate than the service. The service connects on the back end. The login component is something that we're going to inject onto our page, right? So we can log in, log out, and all those kind of things. So what does the login component look like? Well, there is a combination of things it's going to be, right? One of the things is going to be some part controller, and the other part is going to be HTTP stuff, like actual HTML stuff, right? Let's try this out. So again, new file. We're going to call this the login.tsx, right? And our login component is going to be a React component. So we're going to import React from React. That's the first part that we're going to do. And we're going to modify this as we go. We're also going to use React Router DOM. So we're going to import a couple of things from React Router DOM. We're going to import our link. We're also going to import our use navigate, which is a hook, as well as use params. And those are different hooks. Anytime we say use anything, those are called hooks that we're going to use from our React DOM. So from, again, React Router DOM. Okay. And what this is going to do is allow us to link and connect and do all this kind of stuff right through our login component. Next, we need to import our newly forged Auth Service. So we're going to say from Auth Service, right, this thing here, I want to use that Auth Service, right? And I want to say that from there, I'll make it import Auth Service from our / services and then Auth Service. So we just made that to be used. There it is. Okay. And before we complete this piece, right, when I'm starting to think about how to do this, remember what this is. This is an actual login page that I'm going to show, right? So what I'm going to do is have a function called login, right? And I'm going to return some kind of data, right? And let's just return a paragraph tag for now, just to meet the requirements of the return statement. And then I'm going to export default login. So this is our login page. This is kind of our little component. So it doesn't break anything is what I want to show you, right? Okay. And so this is our first piece, if you will, okay? And the first piece is basically going to allow us to log in. Inside of the login function, the first thing, again, we're going to put in, just like we did last week, is something called use effect. That's our first hook that we kind of learned about. And use effect is what it's going to do is it's going to change the document.title so that it shows us the login page. So there's the login page, right? They'll say login, right? So that means that in the document title, when I ever go to my login link, right? When I do my login link, then inside of this piece here, if I have a login link here, it's going to allow me to log in, and the title instead of contact us will be login. That's what it's going to be. Okay, so that's what this is going to do. Okay, so we have some stuff. Let's put in the actual login page and see what it looks like here. Okay, so that's one thing I want to do. And remember, we have this information, and luckily now we have the other server running on the back end, which is this one. Here's our server running on the back end. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close all of these extra things. We don't care about these things. But what I will do for the server on the back end is I want to grab that view, right, which is our under content login. I want to grab all this from the back end. All right, so this is the container, blah, 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 all this stuff. And we'll modify this so that it will work on the front end. So instead of us redoing or reinventing the wheel, if you're going to convert from EJS View Engine to React, this is the first thing we're going to do. So Control A, copy it. And I'm going to go back to my front end application, which is this one. And I'm just going to paste it right in here with issues. Okay, like before, we got to convert all of our class stuff to class name. So I'm just going to highlight this little snippet that I put in, and I'm going to do Control F, and I'm going to look for class, right? And I'm going to replace with class name, okay, which is something that we want to do right in here. Okay, so we're just going to replace all, which takes away a large amount of our errors, many errors. This piece right here, this message area, as an example right now, where we're going to be injecting our message area and all that kind of stuff. You know, for now, what we're going to do is just for this piece, I want to talk about the form. Okay, so the form, there is my login as an example, and there are many other things here. But for now, I'm just going to remove the message area from this piece. I will come back to this in a bit, okay? So other things that it's not going to like, okay? So when I do a form, it says no validate. It says property no validate does not exist on this type. So let's just get rid of it, okay? Inputs are interesting because it says that it says input, the JSX element input has no corresponding closing tag. And notice that it's here. That's actually an error. It should be like this, and that fixed it. So again, great thing about JSX is it picked up a problem with our closing tag that I missed when I was typing in the login page, which is awesome. It gives you good code hinting again. Whereas even with TypeScript doesn't normally capture those kinds of things, right? So that's our login page so far, okay? And the first part, of course, is enter the username and password and all that kind of stuff. And what we want to do here is we want to modify the information and kind of take the information from here and send it somehow. And the only way to do this is to maintain something called state. So again, remember, I'm going to have my username and I'm going to have my password that are literally going to come from the form. So how do forms work in React, right? again, I want to do some of this work up front without doing a round trip to go to the back, right? So here where I have my input type text and form control, this part right here, where it says required, I have my value, I have a placeholder, and I can also incorporate something called an onChange event. So onChange is something that we can incorporate with on the React side, where onChange is an event that I'm going to handle when I log in. So this is kind of the way it's going to work. In order for me to handle that event, right, as an example, there's a couple things I need. One of them is the ability for me to have my username and password. And I'm going to use something called useState. Let's take a look at useState and what that means on React. And I know I'm going fast, but bear with me. So if I go to React, useState, just for a second to talk about what that is, it is something called a state hook. Okay, that's where it comes from, state hook. And what it allows you to do is you kind of configure it like this. And anything that's inside of this, right, allows you to there's two, almost like an array or a tuple, if you will. That's what this kind of looks like, where I have the array that has two components, the object that I want to save and some kind of setter. The object is like a getter, and this is the setter, almost like I want to have a variable that I want to save, kind of in memory. That's what I'm doing here, okay? Because remember, what I'm doing is when I press the submit button, I don't want that variable to go away. I want to be able to use it, similar to what we did when we did our Flash, the stuff we did with Flash on the front end. So useState, that's kind of a very popular way of doing it. We're using this useState hook to do it. And notice that the other way to do it is, here's the class-based example, where state is like is part of something called a prop, okay? This is kind of the older way to do it. And so state, like it says, starts with a count of 0. And then in this particular case, and what we can do is we can increment count. So example, you clicked count times. Count in this particular case keeps track of every single time I click it without, even though the button's clicked, it doesn't have to go anywhere, and it's literally in the browser. It'll keep track of, of this binding. And this is in a way a data binding. That's what I'm creating, a data binding that's available to us in the browser. So again, when I click a button, it keeps track of state. It doesn't have to go to a JavaScript function or anything else like that. It's almost like a variable that keeps track of information, okay? So that's what useState allows us to do, okay, useState. So similarly, I want to keep track of my username and password, and I want to use useState twice. In order for me to use state, notice I have useEffect up here, right? I'm going to do the same thing here. So before I do useEffect, I'm going to set up some states. So const, that's how we do it. And then in square brackets, we're going to put in the getter and the setter. The getter is going to be called username, right? And the setter is going to be set username. Okay, it's got to be matched with what the username is typically. And then we're going to say that this is equal to useState. And useState is going to start off at 0. So that is what's going to happen first. And notice how useState says it doesn't know what this is. Well, what we can do is, of course, we can import from React, and now it does. So useState is another hook. So these are two hooks we've learned so far. useEffect and useState. Actually, we learned another one too last week that we've been using, okay? So useEffect, remember what useEffect does? It acts like a constructor function. So whenever we come to a function like login, it automatically triggers, all right? And useState is something that we want to set up a variable or some kind of something that we want to keep inside of our alive in our browser, almost like, remember that our browser or variables, they lose scope, right? They lose scope when I go to another page or when I press a button or something like that. Here, useState, it does almost like a data binding, all right? That's what it does. So I want to do the same thing with our passwords. When I want to keep track of my password too. So here's my password. and I can say set password. Okay, where I say that I want to say use state, and I want to set the password by default to nothing and the username to nothing. This is the initial value. If I check what username is right now, it's just going to be empty, and password is just going to be empty. But I'm going to use set username and set password to change these values where I keep track of them. Okay, so that's what those two do. And so that is kind of the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to say that down here where we have the value, I'm going to inject whatever the value is. I'm going to get the value here from my username. So that is the username value, which is coming from the state that I've set up here. Okay, I'm just going to make these a little bit nicer so you can see them like this. So that is what's happening. So notice that that is lit up now because it's basically saying get the username from the state that I've stored here. Okay, and that's what's going to, it's going to come from here and it's going to be produced up here. Okay. Next, what happens when I change my username, when I actually go in and log in for the first time? Because right now, username isn't going to change until I enter my username in here, right? Well, we need an event handler to get this done. And the way it works with React, when I want to make an event handler, again, remember, I'm not using jQuery. I'm not using any other kind of JavaScript. It's right here. It's almost like my, I'm combining my my controller and my view together. Again, hence a view controller. All right, that's what I'm making. I'm just going to space these out a little bit differently here, right? There's my view controller. And then again, look, even here it says password has a problem with the closing tag, which we're going to add in. There we go. So what I want to do is I want to, in effect, I want to kind of put together a change handler here for this one. And the way change handlers work, let's do it after the use effect hook, okay? How it's going to work is it's going to look like this. I'm going to make a brand new function called onChangeUsername. And there's going to be two parts to it. There's going to be the event, right? Which we're going to call, we're going to make it a change event. And the change event is going to be of type HTML input element. Okay, that's going to be the type of change event that we're going to create. Okay, this is how you do it. Okay, and what you do here is you want to say, I want to use the set username setter up here, and I want to set it to the event.target.value, whatever the event target value is. Okay, so onChangeUsername is going to be the event that's going to get the value from my username and set the username into this state variable. State variable, again, is going to be like a global variable that's available in my login form that I'm going to use to log in with. Okay. So how do you use it? Well, down in here where it says onChange, I'm going to put in the onChangeUsername handler. Okay, I'm just going to put these spaces here so you can see this a little bit clearer. And that takes care of my username being entered. When I enter my username, the onChangeUsername is triggered, and it's going to use the set username setter to set the username and keep track of it as a state variable. Okay, that's how it works. Next. So now that we've done that for username, well, it'd be nice if we did the same thing for passwords. Let's spread this out a little bit too. So again, the value here is going to be, we're going to start off as password, and then we want a onChange event to be available for the password as well, which is going to be called onChangePassword. We don't have this yet. That's why it's giving us an error. But it's going to be very similar to onChangeUsername. Okay, so let's do that. So up here, it's almost like a copy paste of this one, right? Where we're setting the password, onChangePassword. And when the password is changed, we want to set the password to the target value, whatever the target value happens to be, in this case, whatever the password the user enters. So the value comes from here and gets sent to here. Okay, that's how it happens. And we're doing that in app. This is the way you would do it, because remember, we are constructing the HTML at the same time we're making changes, right? So that's how React deals with this issue, right? Because otherwise, how would it do such a thing? How would it deal with it, right? All right, so that's the first part. So the first part is, let's take care of the username and password changes. Okay, that's what those two pieces are. The next piece down here where it says, I want a button for submit, the submit button. Here's my login button. And I have a login button and a cancel button and all that kind of stuff. All those things are still good. So nothing changes here in the form, okay? My little div where that says you don't have an account, go to register, that is also okay. It's going to take us to the register page, right? So that is all good together. But remember, anchor tags like this don't work in React the same way. If we want them to work through the router, we need to change the anchor tag to a link. So let's do that. There's that link. And we don't do an href, but rather we do a to. So a link to, and then it's going to be equal to a object that looks like /register. Okay, and we can get rid of this piece. Again, all we're doing is converting from regular, kind of HTML and regular JavaScript to something that's compatible with React. Okay, so that's what we're doing here. So far, so good. Nothing else has changed. What else do we need? Okay, so this is the piece we want to do, right? So the form itself, okay, the form when it gets posted, we have our form and it's a beautiful thing. And notice we have the method, which is a post method. Well, guess what? Our method that's a post method is no longer a post method, because post method would have been good if we were directly connecting to our backend, but we are not. Okay, instead of connecting to our backend, we need some middleware that we're going to use to connect to it. And we're going to do that here in a, we're going to use an on submit, where the form, when it submits, is going to have some kind of submit handler that's going to be here. This is where the submit handler is going to be. And so for on submit, we need to be able to, to have a way of doing it. So I'm going to call this function handle login. So let's do the handle login function. So the function is going to be called handle login. I could also call this on form submit or on login submit, whatever you want. I like to call it handle login because it makes sense. For the event type, in this case, I'm going to make it any because of how complex it is, right, to start off. And I want to prevent default behavior. All right, so prevent defaults. And the reason why I want to, with the capital D, the reason why I want to prevent default from the beginning is I don't want the form to actually go anywhere. Okay, so handle login is what this is going to be, handle login, which is the event hook, if you will, that's going to trigger when I press the submit button on the bottom. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So the handle login event will trigger this one right here. Notice that again, the controller for the view and the view itself, which is this part, are in one place. Okay, very, very simple. Well, maybe not so simple. All right, next. So somehow in here, so these are the things I need. I need to construct some user data, the user object. That's what I need to do. And I need to use the Auth Service, right, to perform login. That's what I need to do. Those are the two pieces that are left, right? So, well, how do I do that, right? Because I need to get my user information in order for me to log in, right? So let's think about this for a second, right? I have a data object, which is my user data, right? My user data. And my user data is going to allow me to log in, but I don't have any idea of what that user data looks like. So we need a user model, like we've done before, on the front end to be able to log into the back end. Whew. Save this first. So that's also a requirement. Let's get that user model going. Okay, user model. Well, and you're going to be like, wow, Tom, you're jumping all around. Well, because it's like a chicken or the egg thing, right? On one hand, I could have done the user model first and come back here, or I can show you where I need it and go and do it now. It's really up to, well, how you're going to show this thing. And I think it's more natural to do it this way. So first, again, what I showed you is here's the form. This is how we're going to react to the form. And notice we're using these on-change handlers, on-change handlers, on-submit handler, right? These are event handlers. And these event handlers are going to give us interaction with the form itself, this stuff, okay? And so what we need to do here when we handle the login is we need to construct our user object, but we don't have a user model, right? So that's the first thing we need to do. Let's go into our models and make a brand new file, all right? And we're going to call this the user, capital U.tsx. So what's the difference between a user model and a component? Well, again, it is not using React. So one thing we can put in is we're going to export and export default, and we're going to make something called an interface. So really, this is a way of us describing a type without actually doing anything. The type is going to be called iUserData, and user data is going to have all the things that we need for the user. For example, the username, which is going to be a string, the password, which is going to be a string, the first name, which is going to be a string that comes from the registration form, the last name, which is going to be a string, also from the registration form, and our email address, which is going to be a string. Now you're going to say, wait, Tom, don't we have all this stuff in the back end? Correct. We have it on the back end, but we don't have it on the front end. Front end and back end are two separate servers that have nothing to do with each other, potentially. I could write my front end and not have anything to do with the back end. And so that's why I need to write my own models in the front end. Okay, so save. And that is the model we need. We need our user model, and we need to import this user model back inside of the login component. Okay, so that's the next piece we need to do. We need to import this thing in the login. So up here at the top, as you can see, we've got our auth service, and let's import the model. So we're going to say import, and again, you can call this user model or whatever you want. I'm going to call it user model in this case. Our user model from /models/user. There it is, the user model. And that user model is something that we're going to use for, for constructing our user objects, which makes sense, right? So how do we do this now? Well, we want to say that inside this area here, we're going to say const, and we're going to call this user data. Our user data is going to be of type user model. There's our user model. There it is. There it is, our user model. And we're going to say that this is equal to this. Okay, so user data is of type user model. That's what it says. And it says user data, it says, is declared but value is never used, and type is missing the following properties. Look, username, password, first name, last name, and email address. It needs that stuff, right? So if I go there and it says remove unused, delete it, or add missing properties. Look how beautiful this is. If I click add missing properties, then boom, we have all the properties we just declared inside of our model, which is pretty cool, right? And then now we can just fill them in. So we can say username is username. Where does this come from? From our state that we're keeping track of. Password is password. We're reading it. Remember, this is our getter and this is our setter. Okay, so username and password are here, but we don't need to set our first name, last name, and email address because those things are only going to be set in registration. But we do need the whole user model if I'm going to use the same user model for registering our user. All right, so this is constructing our user model. So this again, instantiate an object of type user model, which is going to be our user data object. That's going to hold our user data. Okay. Then we're going to use the auth service to perform login. And the way that looks is, hey, auth service. Hey, auth service, I'm going to log in. Notice that that comes up, right? And I'm going to pass in my user data dot, our username and our user data dot our password, whatever the password and the information I'm getting from our form. Again, this username and password are coming from in here, right? Our username and password. We're getting that information and we're passing it to the login function in the auth service, right? And of course, what we're going to say is when I'm logged in, let's perform a promise. Let's do a promise. And what I want to do is, when I'm finished logging in, I want to navigate. This is something I'm going to do. I want to navigate to the movie list page. Okay, I don't have a movie list page yet, but this is what I want to do, right? That's what I want to do. And so instead of going to the movie list page for now, because we don't have it, is let's just navigate to the home page. Okay, so how that would look is I need to use the navigate kind of a way of navigating. And remember, I have use navigate in here and use params. So use navigate, just to show you this, use navigate is another hook. And what it really does is it allows us to navigate or almost like change location, if you will, from like a href request from one link to the other. That's what use navigate does. So that's another hook that we're going to set up here. We're going to say const navigate is going to represent use navigate. Okay, that's what navigate does. So almost like an alias or use navigate. And what I can do down here is do exactly that. I can say, let's navigate to, notice where it says to, I can navigate to whichever page I want. In this particular case, I want to navigate to the, for now, the home page. Okay, that's what I want to do. So home. So this is different than what I've done before, because remember we had a link, which is looking like this. This is a link. So when I want to link to another page, I click on the button and I go to it, right? That's what this does. In my header, I use something called Nav Link, and Nav Link allowed me to navigate from one link to the other. That's what the header allowed me to do. And now in login, we're seeing a third way of navigating, which is almost like a redirect. That's what this is. This is kind of equals to res.redirect on the back end, right? That's what it kind of does, right? And it redirects to home. Now, home is not what I want right now. This is temporary, right? So we'll say temporarily link to home page. And we'll say to do, we'll put a to do in here, right? Change this link. So again, remember to-dos. To do, it'll highlight this. I'll say change this link to movie list. That's something I got to do. Okay. So that's kind of what it's going to do. So when I'm done logging in, it's going to take me to the movie list, but for now only to the home page because we don't have a movie list. Okay. What if though I have an error, right? Then on error, what I can say is I want to do something else. Okay, I want to do something else. And what we're going to do here is we want to do a window location dot reload, right? There's location reload, and I want to reload me. I want to reload myself. But what this will do is just take me back to the login page. So again, to do, we haven't done this yet because we're trying to replace Flash messaging. So again, to do, we want to needs a replacement for Flash messaging because we don't have Flash messaging on the front end anymore. It's gone. Okay. So hopefully this is helpful for you. Okay, so again, I got a couple of to-dos as I'm building my login page, but for the most part, we're so far so good to go. All right, so again, I've used params. Sorry, do I need use params right now? And I don't think I do. So I'm going to just remove anything that I'm not requiring. I'm just looking at my notes here to make sure that this is good. Yeah, I don't think I need that right now, use params. Let's just get rid of it. It's not going to hurt me. Okay, so that is my login page. Yay, I got my login page set up for me and blah, 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 but there's no way to navigate to it. There's no way to navigate to it. So the way we're going to do this, to navigate to the let's get rid of this. We don't need this anymore. To navigate to my login page, I need to change my app.tsx, right? Because remember, my app.tsx, which is right here, has my router in it. This is where my router lives right now. And inside here, I want to be able to log in and all that kind of stuff, right? So here's my contact page, right? And after my contact page, I want to be able to log in. So I'm going to say, let's just copy paste. And I want to do a login. And when I go to my login page, it's going to produce my login. And it says, hey, login doesn't exist. Do you want to implement it or import it? Yes, I do. There it is. But this doesn't belong here, right? Where it belongs is, in my authentication area. So here, I'm going to grab this from here. So cut this out. And here's my content components. But we're going to have a whole section here for authentication components that are going to be placed here. And let's just put it in there. There we go. That's login. And let's test it out. Let's see how it works. Can we perform a login now? We can't do a logout. We can't do that yet. And we can't do a register or anything like that because we don't have those pages. But let's see if we can do a login and let's see how that works. So save. And if everything goes well, we should still be able to access our page, which is here, except there's no link for login yet because we have to add that in next to the header. How do we do that? Okay, so, but what if I went to login? I should be able to see now my login page. There it is. So, minus my CSS, right? Because my CSS is missing, right? My CSS is missing, but here it is. Here's my login page. Okay, how do I get my CSS back? Because I want my CSS back from my login page, right? Remember all this? Well, remember my CSS, I had it on my backend. So if I go back to the backend, which is this, and if I look at my CSS, my CSS is in the client inside here, and under content app CSS, it's this part. I want to grab all this and use this as my app CSS now for my login page. So I'm going to grab all this part. This is from the back end from my previous project. So copy this. And I'm going to go back to my front end as I continue to evolve and transition from back to front. Okay. And inside of my app CSS, which is right here, I'm just going to copy this in, save. And when I do that, and if I go back to my login page, you can see now we're back to the familiar login page we saw in the past. Let's perform a login. So I'm going to try and log in with admin. So admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now what it's going to do if I successfully log in, remember all the steps. It's going to go through, talk to from my authentication service back to my back end. And if everything goes well, it should take me to my home page. Let's see if this works. So log in. Hey, that's a really good sign. And how do I check to see if I'm really logged in? Well, I'm going to do Control-Shift-J. I'm going to take myself to my application components. And notice now inside of my local storage, I have a user key and all of this stuff. Take a look. This is all my stuff that I have in my user. I have success true, message is user logged in successfully. And I have this token. This is my token that I'm going to use. Look at that. That's my token that I need every single time. Cool. I also have information about my display name and a bunch of other things that I need if I want to use them. Okay, there it is right here. Okay. I don't have to send this. This is for, right now, it's for troubleshooting purposes that I have this stuff in here. But you can see what I got. I got everything, right? This is a great example of me logging in. Well, what if I want to log out? Well, there's no way. I know what logout does. It removes this key. So I can just delete the key And that simulates me logging out. Okay, if I delete this key. So if I go delete, right, then that's what it should do. And if I refresh, notice right now it's not deleted, right? But that's what I want to be able to do. So why does this keep me logged in even though I'm looking to delete this key? So if I refresh, you can see now it's gone. All right, so that is the login service that I've connected, and I'm just going to complete that. Git add dot git commit -m, and I'll say completed login. Well, actually, yes, I have, but one thing I'm missing is in my header, I don't have any way of showing that I'm logged in or logged out. I don't have that ability, remember? Because I took those components out. How do I fix that now in my header component, right? Because I need to put that ability in, right? Back in. Well, guess what? I have access to my Auth service now. I never had that before when I was making my header. Let's do that. So I'm going to import my Auth service. Import, and again, Auth service, right? Here it is. Now that I have my Auth service, it is. Now that I have my Auth service, I can use it. And in my header, well, we have some stuff that we can kind of create. Remember we talked about the state? I can start using my state as well. So I can say, let's make a couple of states. So one of them is if I'm logged in or if I'm not logged in. So I can check to see if I'm logged in with a state. So let's make a new state. We'll call it is logged in, right? So that's going to be the getter, and the setter is going to be set is logged in, right? That's going to be the setter. Again, notice it's like a pair or a set, if you will, or a tuple. Some people call it different things. And this is going to be equal to use state, and we'll set it up as false. Use state does not exist. We need to import it inside of a React. So I'm just going to go here and go update import from React to use state. So now I'm keeping track of if I'm logged in or not in my page. That's what I want to do. Okay, good. The other thing that I'm missing here is a use effect. So I can say use effect. Remember this use effect? I'm going to, when I'm here in my header, anytime I access my header, which is every time I go to a page, I want to set is logged in, right? And I want to use my auth service to get my current user. There's that get current user thing that I talked about. If my current user doesn't exist, then my state is going to remain false. Otherwise, it's going to remain true, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. And again, we need to enact or import use effect from React. So that's something that's added in. So let's we go over this again. Okay, so again, use state is like a global variable that maintains the value in the form in this page, right? As an example, throughout the lifetime of the page itself. Okay, so it doesn't lose state if I refresh the page or anything else. As soon as this header is rendered or drawn to the page, so when I say rendered is generated, the header when the header is generated, so too is the ability for me to know if I'm logged in or not. Okay. Next, I need a way of toggling when I'm logging in and logging out. We'll call this toggle login. Make a new little function that's private, which will be called toggle login. And the little function that we're going to make is we can check to see, wow, Tom. We can check to see if I'm logged in. I can say if is logged in. Notice now I'm using state. Again, I'm using the getter. If I'm logged in, if the value is true, then I want to return a my logout, as an example. And else, if I'm not logged in, right, I want to return my login. Okay. So what I mean by return is I want to instantiate my my login and log out. That's what I want to be able to do. And that means like the links that I don't have here yet. Okay. So remember, we had those links. If I go back, but I removed them. Let's go back to my back end again and go back to my, kind of views, components, header. And remember, we had these links down here. This is for my login, and this is for my logout. Let's grab these links now. So there's my logout. Again, I'm just taking them from here. So this is where this would go. If I'm logged in, then only show my login, my logout link. And I want to return. I wanted to make a new return statement that returns my login, my logout link, this part. So this part's going to be a JSX piece that goes here. It's kind of interesting the way this works. Okay, good. Now this has to be class name because there's no classes. So this has got to be class name. And this is going to be class name. And these anchor tags can't be an anchor tag. It's got to be a nav link, right? Because now it's a nav link. And href can't be here. It's going to be actually a 2, which is going to go here, right? So this is all the same stuff that we've had before. So there's my logout, right? If I'm going to log out, it's going to look exactly how my logout link looked before. That's my logout link. Okay, and I need a return because it's going to inject this link inside of my my header. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to return my my login. So going back to this, I'm going to grab the login link. There it is right here. And I'm just going to put that in here. Okay, again, just like before, we need to make this class name. And oh, one thing we don't need is all of this stuff, right? Because that's all EJS garbage we don't need anymore. So we can get rid of it. And we do need this to be changed to class name. And we do need this to become a nav link. Nav link, there we go. We need to change this to a 2. So I'm going to cut that in there and put that in here. Change this to a 2 and make it an object. There we go. So now we have the ability for me to inject with a return a log out link or a log in link. And that's toggle login. That's what that does. Toggle login. Cool. Excellent. So how do I do that here? How do I put that inside of my link? Well, it's super easy now. Now that I have that, instead of having a list item, I just put in here, and this is a beautiful thing, guys. You'll love this. This is how you can also inject custom JSX, toggle login. Toggle login. And toggle login means when I come to this point, I can generate a conditional link based on if I'm logged in or not. That's what it does. So that is the change that I made right here. I just put it in curly braces. I inject. Remember, curly brace allows me to inject anywhere, any kind of value. And here what I'm doing is I'm actually generating a new list item, which is either going to be a logout or a login list item. So save. And if I do that, and if I go back to my page here to take a look at it, which is here, now you're going to see I have a login link. And if I click login, and if I log in, and I press login, if everything goes well, it's going to detect that I'm logged in, and it should swap this out with a logout, and it didn't do that. Let's see why not. So again, Control-Shift-J, and I got a bit of an error. Okay, no problem. On COP promise, listener indicated synchronous response is true, but which channel was closed before response received. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a second. Let's take a look at the application. I have this in the application, so it looks like it's okay. But what happens to this? Let me make sure I go back to the right thing and make sure that I'm good to go. Notes. Okay, so my auth service is logged in. I use effect. I set is login to my current user. Get current user. Set is logged in. If I'm logged in, and then I toggle login. If I'm is logged in, then I'm going to produce the logout link, right, as an example, and I'm going to return my login. That should work. What did I do wrong? Clickety click. Barber trick. All right, so yeah, that should totally work. What did I do? Toggle login. And let's go to my Auth Service for a second and just check that out. Did I do something wrong there? It's my Auth Service. Service, HTTP common. And I made a class. Good. I logged in. And what do I return back? I return a post request for this. Here's my response, where I get the token, and I return this. And I'm looking for the get current user object. Here it is, where it's JSON.parse, huh? Should work. Yeah, see that's where it was. Sorry, so that can't be public. It's got to be like a SOAP. That was the problem. So now I should be able to log out, but there is no log out because there is no logout methodology yet. And I'm going to make the logout work as an example right now. So that worked. I just had to modify my auth service to do that. Sorry, that was just a typo. I shouldn't have made it public. It should have been private. And why? Because it's going to be part of my auth services class itself. And what I'm doing is I'm going through my auth service to create my get current user. All right, let's see. Did I make any mistakes? Sorry. It's just there's so many little pieces that are all connected together. Okay, good. So now that is my header. Let's create my log out. So how do I do my logging out? Because I want to be able to perform log in, log out, right? So for my log out piece, to make sure that logging in, logging out works, I'm going to go into my authentication here and add in a new component called log out. That's what I'm going to do. So how does that look? Let's make a brand new component, new file. We'll call this logout.tsx. It's going to be a new component, so I'm going to import from React. I'm going to import this time. We know we're going to use useEffect, so I'm going to import it right away this time around. So that's there. I'm also going to import navigate, because I know I'm going to redirect if I'm logged out back to the login page. So React router DOM. Right, and I'm also going to import my auth service. Notice I'm using that auth service over and over again. Auth service from /services/auth service. This one. Okay, and I'm going to make a brand new function called logout, and that is going to be my new component, right? And again, I'm going to return, for now, just an empty paragraph tag just to meet the requirements. And I'm going to do an export default logout. And then I'm going to replace the stuff that I need here with my logout. Logout is pretty simple. In the useEffect, which acts like my constructor function or initializer, I'm going to say useEffect, and it's going to return the document.title is going to be logout. And I'm using this so that from a switching perspective, it does the thing it's supposed to do. And of course, in useEffect, when I ever come to this page, it's very simple. I'm just going to do the auth service.logout. There it is. That's all it's going to do. Okay, so it's very simple what this page is going to do. And what I'm going to do is, when I return, we're going to return a navigate component. So navigate, and I'm going to navigate to /login. It's self-closing, so I don't need to do anything but this. There we go. And just to make sure, I'm just going to go back to my login to see how that, if I formed it up properly when I do navigate. And I think I did. Yeah, like this. So again, what I did here in my logout, this is what I could do, but I could set up a alias, and if I don't, this is what this would look like. And I'm okay with this because I'm returning the object right here. So this is another way of using navigate. So I use navigate in two ways. When I went to my login page, I use navigate this way. I use the use navigate hook, okay? And in my logout, I use navigate from React Router DOM. So that's another way of doing it. Remember, navigating is, there's two ways. React Router DOM means I'm making it into a navigate component that I'm returning, okay, as something that I'm going to do. Both ways work great, and I'm just showing you different ways of doing the same kind of thing. Okay, not to confuse you, but just to give you options. And they solve different problems both ways. So save. So that's navigating, and that will allow me to do my logout. But now I need a logout link in my app.tsx, because without a router link in my app.tsx, it'll never work, right? So remember, my app.tsx has all the routing components. So again, log in and log out. Let's just copy paste. So /logout. On the front end, it's going to perform logout, right? And of course, logout doesn't exist, so I'm going to import it, and I'm just going to put it in the right spot because this part should be up in here. So that's the logout piece. Log in, log out. And save. Okay. And now, if I go back to my page, I should be able to log in. So notice if I have contact, services, projects, about, home. If I click login, it takes me here. I can log in and click login. It takes me here. I'm logged in, right? And why didn't this work? It's almost like I need to refresh the page. Huh. Still doesn't really refresh the page. That sucks. I'm going to have to fix that problem. But it does work. If I click log out, then it does log me out. And the way to check this is, that's weird. The way to check this is, and that I'm getting a warning from this. It says set state instead inside of use effect, but use effect either doesn't have a dependency array or, okay, so that is in my header. I'm going to fix this problem in a second. Let's go back to my what I'm looking at is my application, and you can see that the key has been gone, right? So again, if you're going to look at it, wow, lots of errors. Lots of errors. Where are these errors coming from? This is because I'm so it's the reason why is because this component, and it tells you where it is, by the way. It's at header. That's where the component is, right? So inside it says a component called set state inside of use effect, but use effect either doesn't have a dependency array or. But again, one thing that it does do is when I log in, let's go back and show you this. So again, we're still working on fixing the problem, but here it is. So if I go here and log in, if I click login, you can see that what we should do is, let's refresh. Yes, there's our user information. So the user information is there, right? And when I log out, which means if I refresh the page for a second, if I log out, there's a logout link. Then if I refresh this piece, you can see now that the link is gone. Okay, so that's what happens. We keep track of stuff, and then we release our information. Okay, so we have some problems, but that's okay because we're going to fix those problems in a bit, and we're going to get back to this. But you can see how the process works. We're logged in and logged out, and that's our login and logout process. One last thing is before we go, I know we're running overtime, guys, but this always takes long, is I want to talk about registration. So how do you do registration here as well? So again, it is another auth component, right? And so under authentication, I'm going to break a brand new file, which we're going to call register, register.tsx. And my register page is going to be similar to what we did with my login page. So again, I'm going to, let's do all the import statements, import React. And again, I'm going to have change events. I'm going to have use effects. I'm going to have use states. These are all things that the hooks that we're using from React. So those things I'm going to have. I'm also going to import link and use navigate and use params. Maybe that's what's missing. I took that off from my React router DOM. Okay. And then I'm going to import my Auth Service. There's my Auth Service. Import my Auth Service from /services/Auth Service. There we go. So we can use that logging and logging out. I'm also going to import my user model from /models/user because I want to be able to use my user model. So all those things are the same when I register, right? So just like I did when I logged in. I had all this stuff, register, pretty much all the same stuff, okay? And then I'm going to make a function called register. And the function is going to have some kind of return, which for now is going to be an empty paragraph to satisfy the requirements. And I'm going to export default register like we normally do. There. All right. And that's the beginning of our our component. And what we want to do is here set up some states. So here's our state. Yes, I can, Rajan, no problem. Just hang out if you can, and I'll do it. Const username, we want to keep track of username and our setter, set username. And then what we can do is we're going to say that that is use state. And we're going to keep that state like so. And we're going to also keep track of password the same way. Password, set password. Where we're going to say, let us use state like so. So we're going to set up our username and password that way. We also want to set up our first name, last name, and email address. All right, so I'm just going to copy paste this. So first name, last name, and email address. And you're going to be like, wait, what? Well, because we need to keep track of that too. So first name is here. This will be set first name, right? And this will be last name, and then set last name. And then email address. And this will be set email address. So these are all state variables, so we're going to keep them in inside the browser information that we have here. We're going to use effect, and our use effect function is going to return our document title, like we said before, which is just going to be called register. Okay, that's our document title. And then the form page is going to be in here, and we're going to get that from our previous version of our code, which is here. So in our components, I have a register page. This is it. I'm going to grab the entire thing, copy it, and move all this stuff over to this piece right here, right? And now, of course, what I need to do is do some formatting. I'm just going to format this whole thing so that we can change class to class name. So 40 replacements there. Fix our self-closing tags, which I seem to have an issue with. I don't know what happened with me, but these are all self-closing tags. It should actually be self-closing tags. All the inputs have to be self-closing tags, and I haven't had a chance. I didn't do this right, actually, when I was putting EJS together. And that's just a learning for me for next time. Okay, so these are all self-closing tags. Again, HTML didn't complain, but they're not exactly perfect, and that's okay. We can fix those quite simply, right? So that's all the self-closing tags. We don't have a message area right now. We're going to get back to this another day. So we're going to fix this problem later. That's gone. We don't have no validate. Doesn't make sense in this context. We're going to get rid of that. We're not going to use a post method because we're going to have our own on change method that we're going to use there. And so far, so good. Our placeholder is going to be on different lines for email, for our username, for our password, for our confirm password, as well as for anything else we have. So those are the same things we have. Our link isn't going to be a link, isn't going to be a anchor tag, but rather a link, right? So we're going to change that, and the href is going to turn into a 2. A 2, which is also going to be an object. There we go. We're just converting. All we're doing here is converting or transitioning from one type to the other. So that is our structure so far for the page, but we need some information, okay? And just like I had my on change events for a username and password, we're going to have the same thing here for username and password changes. So I'm going to go back just to look at the login page for a second. So here's my login, and I had on change username, right? I had on change password. I had those two things. I'm just going to grab those two functions because they're identical in this case. And I'm going to go back to my register page and put those two things in. So on change username, on change password. And I'm also going to have an on change first name and last name. So let's paste those again. And we'll say on change first name. And of course, it's not going to set the username. It's going to set the first name. And on change last name. And this will be setting the last name. Set last name. There we go. So last name. And of course, the last one is email address. I want to grab one of those, right? And paste it in. So on change email address. And we'll just set the email address down here. Set email address. Okay, and those are all set up properly. You can see that I have all of these lit up, but none of these lit up because these ones are all the setters, but the getters haven't been used. And we're also going to have a handle register, just like we handled the login page. We're going to handle a register in order when I submit the form. I'll say a new function that's going to be called handle register, and it's going to be an event of type any. I'm going to event.prevent default, so it doesn't actually do what it's supposed to do. There's going to be a const, and we're going to call this the user data is going to be of type user model, just like we did before, right? And it's going to complain that there's no properties, which we can inject, by adding missing properties, just like we did before. In this case, we're going to say that this is all the stuff we have: our username, our password, our first name, our last name. You can see that this is really convenient. That's why I made a user model, as well as our email address. And what it does, it keeps us structured. So that is our user model. And then finally, we're going to use the auth service to register. Auth service dot register. and we're going to pass in the user data dot username, the user data dot password, the user data dot first name. You can see it says that right here, right? What I need, first name, the user data dot last name, and the user data dot email address. There we go. So that satisfies all the components of the registration service. And then what I'm going to say is when I'm registered, then this is good. I want to navigate, right? Just like we did before, navigate. I want to navigate to my login page. And navigate doesn't exist. I want to be able to do this. And that means I need to have an alias for my navigation up here the same way I did it before, which means I'm going to say const navigate. This is all the same. I'm going to use navigate as an alias, right? So navigate is going to represent use navigate. And down here, I'm going to say navigate to the login page because that's what I want to do when I register. So it take me to the login page so I can have the user try and log in. However, what if there's an error? Then this is the part that I'm missing because I haven't set this up yet. I need it to do that actually needs messaging. So that's flash messaging. Needs some kind of, we'll say flash messaging equivalent, right? Where I want to do a window.location.reload, okay? Which reloads the window, kind of when I log in. Okay? Excellent. So that's what it does. And now I need to inject all the data. This is the last thing we're doing, guys, then we're going to stop, okay? I promise. I know we're going overtime a little bit, but we need to so I can get this done for you. And then we can, the next class we get together, we'll do all the data from the database. Okay, so in our registration form, again, I'm going to use an onSubmit, and that's going to equal to the handle register function. All right, so when I click the submit button, then the handle register function will trigger, which is this one right here. It's going to create a piece of user data, and I'm going to use the auth service to register by using Axios to connect to my back end. And then when I'm done registering, it's going to take me back to the login page. That's what this is going to do, okay? That's my handle register handle register event. Then when I want to put in my, here's my personal information for my first name and my last name. In my first name and my last name, I've got to have some stuff in there that I'm missing. So where I have my inputs here and where it says required, I need to add some additional spaces. All right, same thing with my last name. And I'm going to get the username information from the form. So I'm going to say value is equal to my first name, right? And I'm going to say on change, well, that is equal to the, on change first name, right? So that's what that's going to do. So when I change my first name, the on change first name is going to set the first name to whatever it is. Otherwise, this is where the first name information is coming from. So that's why I need both of these. The value is something that I'm going to shunt to the change event, and I'm doing it within form. Same thing with my last name. In my last name, I need a value which is going to equal to the last name, and then my on change event is going to be equal to on change last name, and the on change last name is going to be again triggered when I change my last name. Save. So that's the last name part. Let's keep going. So the next part is email address, very similar. So again, it's equal to email address. And then I'm going to say on change, and then it'll be on change email address. And username and password is important too. So there's email address, username. Again, it's going to be username, right? And notice that the username has to be spelled correctly because we want to match it with the backend. And then onChange is going to be equal to onChange username, right? Which is going to match with what we already have. And finally, the password and the onChange event is going to equal to onChange password. And that's going to take care of that. So those are all the changes we need. We don't have any user validation. So this change event, this like confirm password thing, this is a to-do. Okay, I don't have a confirm password, a way of confirming password. So this is something we have to change. So again, we can put a note in here like so. And I'm showing you this because this is things that we have to fix up later on. Remember the way the notes work, right? Inside of TSX, we can say to do, need to validate that passwords are the same. Okay, so that's something we need to do in. We just put in that little note in there. So that's something that we need to fix up when we're done. All right, so that is the register page. And it's very similar to the login page. And we're going to save. I'm going to leave use params out because we don't need it right now. And if we did, it would come up. And then what we need to do is in the app.tsx, in order for us to make this work, well, we need to have a link, some kind of link to this. So we don't have it. So again, it's login, register, and log out. Let's put register before log out, just from to be correct. Here's register. We're going to call this the register link. That's the same as before, where we're going to import the register. And instead of leaving the import statement here, we're going to move it up to here. So that way we have login, register, and log out. Awesome. And yeah, everything else is the same. And I think I know why the login stuff doesn't work now. Now that I'm looking at it, I realize that we need a state variable called isLoggedIn. And the isLoggedIn state variable, we're going to use state, right? So, and useState is going to have that same variable stuff that we had before. Let me just show you this for a second. So I'm going to go to our login page just for a second, and I'm going to grab that, our header. I'm going to go to the header page, and I'm going to grab that useState for logged in, and I want isLoggedIn. Okay, so I'm going to grab this. And I want to use that same thing in our app service, our app.tsx. So here, when I go to enable our app, I want to have a, in here, I want to use state. So there's our use state. Let's import from React, please, is state. And I also want to, when we do this, right, one thing we know when it comes to being logged in is I want to be able to pass the information that if I'm logged in or not, as an example, I want to be able to pass that information. By now, we're false by default. That's the state. And that's isLoggedIn. And I want to be able to pass that isLoggedIn information out of here back to the page. That's the problem. That was what was missing before. Okay. And we're going to be able to do that next time. All right. So because I'm running out of time now. But let's fix this issue. So again, here's our registration, right? And here's our login and logout. Let's test registration out. And we'll register a new user. So again, if I refresh, I need to log in, or I can register. Let's click on register. It should take us to our registration page now. And I should be able to make a new user called John. And we'll say john.doe at example.com. His name will be john.doe. And his password will be, of course, 123456. And we'll just do the same thing. Notice that I can't enter the password here. Look, no matter how I do it, I can't enter the password. And the reason why I can't, if I click register here, it'll say, please fill out this form field. And the reason why I can't enter this password is because there's no two-way data binding that's happening right now. So I need to come back to this. Let's go back to my form for a second. My registration form, not this one. This one. So remember that I did, down in here, I said that we need to fix this problem. And here's my password. And my on-change is on-change password. Well, what we need to do is if I want to confirm my password, just like we did before, I need to have another state, that's in here. That is, we'll call it confirm password. So instead of password, we'll call it the confirm password. And confirm password is set confirm password, right? So set confirm password. And confirm password is something that we're going to get in from our in here. So this is confirm password. There it is. Here's confirm password. And on change event, so we'll say on change, we need to call a on confirm password, on confirm password, which doesn't exist. And by the way, here's something else to notice. If I go here, it says, do you want to fix all detected stuff and change the spelling to confirm password? Well, no, because this is the event, the change event that we want up here. So we don't have an on-confirm password, but we're going to make one. So we're going to copy this one. And actually, we're going to say on change confirm password. What we're going to call it, just to make it so it's the same as what it was before, right? And we're going to set confirm password here. Sorry, set confirm password here. We're not doing anything with the data right now, but we're just going to make it so that it's set up. So set on set confirm password, right? Did I do it wrong? On change, sorry, on change. On change confirm password. There we go. All right, so that's where it's going to be. And now if I did that, and if I go back to my page, and let's do John Doe again. So John Doe, and then say john.doe at, I wonder if it already did the push because I changed stuff. John Doe, and then I'll say username is John Doe. I don't think so. And then its password is 123456, 123456. Now you can see I can enter it. And if I click register, then it should take me back to my login page. And that's a good sign because now I should be able to log in. Let's log in with John Doe. John Doe and 123456. If I click login, it should take me to my login page. And this should save state, which it doesn't yet, but it will. And then if I go to application, I'm going to come back to this. You can see that the user logged in successfully. And then now here's something. It says display name is undefined, and my username is John Doe. So why is this display name undefined? Well, that's the way I'm sending things back. So this is something I need to change because guess what? My display name is something that I'm not able to send back to the back end, although it did register a user that is John Doe. Okay, so first name and last name is what I'm sending back to the back end. Okay, well, let's check that out and see why is that a problem. So again, I'm getting my username, I'm getting my email address, and I'm getting my first name and my last name, but guess what? All of these in my name variables are all lowercase. They're all lowercase. See, first name, last name, And because of that, what ends up happening is on the back end, let's go back to the back end, this part. Remember this, right? Well, I can also, let's do another terminal, and let's do a Mongosh. And if I do Mongosh, there it is. And if I do show DBS, you can say, here's the database, right? And if I look at my media, so if I go use media, and if I do a show collections, you can see that I have my users collection. If I do db.users.find.pretty, then you can see that I have a John Doe, but my display name is undefined, undefined. Let's get rid of John Doe. So remember, I want to do db, let's get rid of it. I'll redo it in a second. db.users.remove, and I want to remove I want to use my username. That's what I'm removing. I'm searching for a username that is John Doe, and I'm going to remove that guy, right? Users.remove. And it says true, removed. So if I go and try and find that username anymore, that user is gone. Let's go back to my front end and log out. I'm logged out now. And if I refresh, you can see that this is logged out. Nice. And I want to register again, but I need to fix that problem, which is here, where my first name and last name, right? I want to get the value of my first name and last name for here, but my first name and last name is, well, lowercase first name and lowercase last name. Because guess what? My backend for my routes, here's my auth, and here's my post register page. If I go to definition for this one, go to definition, right? It needs, for my request.body, it needs a lowercase first name and a lowercase last name. And I'm giving it an uppercase first name and an uppercase last name, which means this part is going to be undefined. Okay, so that's how it links to the back. Okay, just to show you this. And of course, to fix this problem, there are a couple of approaches we can use. One of them is to change the requirements for this one. Okay, that's one thing I could change. So I could go into the controller like I have here, and I could change the first name and last name requirements so that they are when I'm registering, I could change in so that it's first name and last name, as an example, are uppercase instead of lowercase. So here I'm not passing in that information. Well, how do I know that I'm not passing that information in? Like how is it not coming here? Because on the front end, let's go back to the front end here, I'm getting this form and there's the first name and last name, they're lowercase, yes, nice, nice, nice. But my service, when I'm coming over here, it says first name and last name on the front end is the thing that I've got going on. So there is a disconnect between what I'm saving here, because look what I'm passing in. I'm registering and I'm passing in username, user data.first name, user data.last name, all these things that I'm passing in there. And if I go back to the register service, go to definition, then the register service is going to pass in first name and last name, right? Notice that those are caps, and so is email address, right? And those two pieces are no good. Here's something. Did I even get an email address? Again, these are things that we can check as we pass things from one place to the other. First name, last name, and email address is all caps. Username and password is lowercase, right? And this is the thing that's actually doing the post request right here, right? So where I'm passing in this object, the username, this is the object I'm passing, username, password, first name, last name, and email address. But again, what I'm looking for the back end, if I go to the back end itself, what I'm looking for from the back end is a username, email address, first name, and last name, all lowercase. So these pieces have to be in accordance with what I'm doing up here, right? So what we need to do is change this. So I'm going to refactor rename. So this is the most important piece right here. So I'm going to refactor rename. So refactor, And I want to actually, it's called the rename symbol, right? Which is what I want to do. So there's F2. And I want to change this to first name because it's got to be lowercase, right? First name, like so. And if you look here, that is how I have it. First, let's try that again. So F2, first name, like that. That's how it's going to be spelled. And the same thing goes for last name, F2. It's going to be last name, like so. Okay, and I'm refactoring it this way so we know. And same thing with email address. Email address has got to be email address. So again, here, I'm refactoring it so it's email address. Okay, there we are. And that's the register piece. Save. Let's try it again. Let's see if I made a change or if I'm didn't work. So again, it's John Doe. Email address is john.doe@example.com. Username is John Doe. Password is 1234556, and confirm that for now, which doesn't do anything. If I click register, then I can log in. And if I go John Doe and 123456 and click login, I should log in. This should actually show me a login or logout page, which hasn't done yet. And if I go Control-Shift-J, then we should see in our application the information that I want. And now it's still giving me username undefined. And also, look at this, I'm even getting an email address that's missing. Huh. So username went through, John Doe, but display name, well, that is not happening. Okay? That's not happening. So even though I changed the names and all that kind of stuff, it really didn't do anything from what I wanted. So but somehow John Doe went through. The username went through, and the password went through because it worked. But look what happened. There's not even an email address. I don't even know if the email address is here. Let's check to see what I got on the front and the back end. So again, email address was here before. We were able to do that, but not so far. So again, if I do a db.users.find.pretty, you can see that email address didn't even go through, right? I don't even have an email address that was created here at all, right? Well, that's weird, right? That's really weird because look, it says email address, and then this didn't even make an email address when I did a post request, right? So yes, here's my process page, and I'm getting a request. I'm making a new user object, and yes, I've got my email address and my display name, and well, I'm not getting anything from here or here. So what we can do is we can look at the request.body.whatever, but we know that the display name that we're getting for first name and last name, when I combine these to make the display name, well, is empty, like completely. It's undefined, like I'm getting undefined here when I'm coming through. So that is a problem that we got to fix, right? So that is something that is an issue, right? Because otherwise, I mean, sure, we're registering success is true, but one thing that can really help us is when I register, the user is registered, is we want to do some troubleshooting, right? And sure, we can say that the user registered successfully. We've got our username and password, but what about the rest? How come that's not coming through, right? So again, the hints are in our the way our auth service is working. So again, whenever I do our HTTP post request, the post request is doing the following. It's saying, hey, let's go to the URL, and we're going to send in information from the user data, right? And the user data that we're going to send across is username, password, lowercase, plus first name, last name, and email address. Okay, that is the data type that we're sending across. So wait a minute, but why is that happening? Well, because of this part, right? So this part is wrong. It's when we refactored, it actually added in some additional things. This should just be first name, right? And this should be last name, as well as just email address. We just send it across clearly like this. Cleanly. Save. Let's try one more time. So again, going back to the back end, we'll just remove the username John Doe, which we did. And we'll go to the front end, we'll log out, and we'll refresh to see that that is good. Again, we're working through our problems right now, one thing at a time. And here we'll do the same thing. We'll register for the first time. Make sure that everything's saved. I think I got everything saved, yeah. And we'll do the same thing, john.doe at example.com. And then it was John Doe as the username and 123456 as the password, register. And let's just do it again. So we'll say John Doe 123456. We logged in, refresh, and Control-Shift-J should give us our application information, and ta-da, we're good. Take a look at that. And the user information, this is why we're doing this, is we got everything in the user information that we didn't have before. So that solves our issue there. Notice how this keeps going out of control. These errors keep mounting up. It's because something is continuing to reload, which we're going to fix in a second. If I go back and take a look at the console to see what those errors are, it's this. It says this can happen when a component calls setState inside useEffect, but useEffect doesn't have a dependency array, or one of the dependencies changes on every render, right? So that's what's happening. And it's looking in the header information right here. So it's checking to see if I'm logged in, or logged out on reload. And it's giving me these nonstop errors, which we're going to fix in a bit. Okay. So what I want to do is, we've gone about half an hour over like normal, and I think this is a good place to stop. We're going to continue with fixing it next week, right? But the idea here is that we fixed our problem there, and we worked with the front and the back. Sometimes we need to do this. There's a back, here's the front end, and the front end service, we have to be very careful that anything we send to the back end is matched with what the back end is looking for, this stuff here. Even though we want to make it so our names look beautiful or whatever, who cares what this looks like? What's most important is what we send to the back end. Okay, same thing with the login page. So whenever we log in, so this is our login page. Notice I'm sending a username and password, and this is going to be in the same format. We're kind of substituting what it would be like. This is the post request. What it would be like if I passed form information from the front end to the back end. And that's what Axios allows us to do. Okay. So the back end is working. The front end is having issues because of a couple of problems. One, the header. The header is trying to figure out when I'm logged in, then we want to set the use state, and it says useEffect. There's a problem. It says useEffect. It says that add dependency array. Look, it tells us this, right? And if I was to do that and I add a dependency array like this, okay, for our header, right? And I know this is kind of silly, but I'm just showing you this as an issue because otherwise it's going to run out of control forever. useEffect is weird in that, you know, for our front end, we should use a dependency array, or else what's going to end up happening is it's going to continue to try and trigger the is logged in state over and over again. And that's not what we want to do, right? So that's why the dependency array is there, okay, in useEffect. And we have to do that in different places sometimes, right? So let's see if this makes a change to our problem. So if I go down to here, and again, if I log out, and let's say I log in as admin now, right? Then look at that. It fixes our problem. Log out, right? Oh, but now we're not showing us, we have to refresh, and now it's the other way around, right? Where we're always logged in or logged out. So if I go admin 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and log in, then I want to get rid of this problem. But now look at the errors. The errors are gone, which is good. The errors going away is a good thing, right? Because again, if I look at my application, you can see that the application information is correct, but now I'm not spinning out of control anymore. And this is the first step to our fixing our problem, okay? By having a dependency array. Okay. And I think that is where I would like to stop. I think that's where I like to stop, because otherwise we can keep spinning out of control and keep fixing this, but it's going to just keep going longer and longer. And there's really no nothing good that can continue to come of it. If I keep going, I can go for another 2 hours, right? So that's not the point. The point is I wanted to show you authentication today and how it works with on the front end, and that's what we accomplished. We also covered Axios, which is something that I wanted to show you, which is the ability for us to do different kinds of post and get requests from the front end to the back end, which is what's required when we start communicating from our React front end to our Express backend. And I started with authentication because I think this is kind of the most key point. Things that are missing, okay, things that haven't been done yet. On the backend, we don't have an auth guard. We don't have a way of doing that, an auth guard. We don't have flash messaging, right? For if we make a mistake, how do I show the flash messaging on the front end? Okay, we don't have anything to do with our movie list yet. Okay, things that are missing. And we have a pile of errors that we have to take care of when it comes to our header. When we kind of go in, we should show that header information as we come out, all right? Like, are we logged in and logged out? We don't have those things yet. But we will get to that, but it will be next week. All right, so questions around React at all? How about that? Any questions? Comments? How about comments? For those people that are watching, you guys have been sticking with me for this time, and I want to talk about it with you guys because I know it's not the easiest piece to get this part. But what we covered today was some stuff that we've seen in the past, which is, and here's one thing, the idea that we're using hooks. And I want you to think about hooks as little events that trigger. Use effect triggers as soon as the page, this component loads. And notice that it was constantly loading because I was trying to figure out, I'm using state and a use effect at the same time. And when I use use effect and state at the same time, that's where we can have some issues. Okay. Footer uses, nothing. So there's no use effect or anything like that. Our, some other things that we made a user model. The user model is just used for us to format our data structure, right? For the back end. We needed a user model on the front end. We used an auth service that we created, and the auth service allows us to connect to the back end. That's what it does, right? And that's really what our auth service is for. We haven't used our auth header yet, and we're going to use our auth header next week when we actually do protecting pages, because I want to be able to do an auth guard. And the only way we can do an auth guard is when we have an auth header that we pass in from the front end to the back end, okay? We modified our app.tsx page to have additional routes to support that. And we're going to work with a state function here in order for us to make sure that this works okay. Okay? And that's it for me for today, guys. Again, any questions before we move on?
Sorry, I'm having trouble.
I know you are.
Please try in a little while.
I will. That's Alexa talking to me. All right. Any questions before we move on? Okay, guys, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to seeing more about your stuff. Rajan, stick around and I'll help you with the other stuff. But that's it for me for today. I know it was a little bit of a long one, but hopefully you guys got more out of it. Yes.
Professor.
I'm here. Let me stop recording on YouTube. Hold on. Yes, go. Yes, Poopinder. Don't worry.